I don't know, and just a bit of an editorial on this morning, but as you know, local government elections in New Zealand are underway at the moment, and that always excites people. Of course, it is. It's part of the democratic process. But last week, or might have been no, start of this week, the there was a piece written by former Prime Minister Helen Clark, which has received quite extensive media coverage throughout the country this week, on the fact that women, in particular, female candidates, are receiving a level of abuse that is uh, beyond the norm and is acting as a powerful disincentive for women to enter into public life in New Zealand. And in her piece that she wrote, her opinion piece on this, she is suggesting that there is a national misogyny in New Zealand, characterised best in online platforms. I guess, what would they be? Facebook, more likely, yeah, Facebook pages, on Twitter, on social media, Instagram.
The
What are the other
X would
ones?
have
All
to be
those.
the worst one, wouldn't
X.
it?
X is full of mad people. At the end of the day, X. Well, it's well named, I would have thought. But anyhow, um, on all of those forums, it's or fora. Is it? Would that the forums fora? Anyhow, that and that as a consequence of this, women are being disadvantaged. She's then unfortunately decided to give some examples of the anger and toxicity that is affecting. And she named three women in particular. And she said this, quote, "There's been high-profile withdrawals from politics here and elsewhere in this very pressured environment. Not only Tory whānau, but Jacinda Ardern's withdrawal from politics was devastating for women around the world." She then also noted the resignation from the prime ministership, although she wasn't but from politics in general, of the Finnish prime minister, the youngish Sanna Marin, who was the Finnish prime minister from 2019 to 2023 until she lost the election. And then, having lost the election, stood down and has now retired from politics and is pretty much on the same speaking tour, can I say, and the same sort of, what's the word, consultancy ambit is our own former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. I'm sure they'll meet up somewhere and have a coffee. Probably do on a regular basis somewhere in New York. Anyhow, that was the argument, and it has received extensive media coverage, including from the New Zealand Herald, and sympathetic coverage to the fact that women in New Zealand are being essentially hounded out of private life, or public life, sorry, by these sorts of attacks. And then, obviously, Helen Clark has provided the evidence of three left Liberal women, or Green women, and said that this is dreadful and how bad it is for women in the world, not just, Wellington or New Zealand, but in the world, as a consequence of this. Listen, I don't mind ex-prime ministers having views. I think it's a good thing for them to have views and enter public debate, and I think all freedom of speech and should be promoted, and the contest of ideas is an excellent idea. But this hysteria, and I'm sorry to use the word because you get accused of sort of sexism if you use the word hysteria. Oh, you're talking woman hysteria. Unless it was male, I thought the COVID response was hysterical. Plenty of males involved in that. But this hysteria that's been whipped up by Helen Clark and by mainstream media in this country, that somehow women are subject to misogynistic abuse and abuse in general that is worse than men, and is preventing them from public life, is just a nonsense. I personally have been involved in politics. I think I stood as a first candidate for the National Party in my 20s, I was selected in 1986, and I stood at the 1987 general election. It was my first election. Lost it. Learned lots of lessons. It was good for me to lose. But nonetheless, one of the things that immediately happened in 1987 is a whole series of Labour people, Helen Clark, would routinely abuse me. Not just through, and social media didn't exist in 1986, 87, but mostly through gossip, through innuendo, through personal attack, through shouting at me, through protests outside my office. And they would abuse me in the most direct, personal, and frankly, often violent, their rhetoric was violent, of ways. And throughout my entire political life, there've always been that group of fringe nutters within the Labour Party, Helen Clark, within the Greens, Helen Clark, within the liberal sector of our society, who believe that their cause is so righteous and that their calling is so correct that everybody else is mad, lacking in intelligence, and if you've got intelligence, therefore clearly so lacking in integrity, that you need to be told in the most offensive rhetoric possible. And that has been my experience, that women and men, and of the centre-right in this country, have been subject to the same kind of abuse, and that, in my experience, Helen Clark, the left are the worst of all abusers, and they include, Helen Clark, women who scream with their mottled faces, and you're worried, in actual fact, for their health, such as their clear vitriol and outrage. And you've only got to attend any one of the latest eco-activist protests in this country to see that kind of behaviour, rhetoric and display. Any day, it has to be said, almost, of the week. To suggest, but there's a reason why, and can I say there was criticism of Tory Whānau and Sanna Marin and Jacinda Ardern, and that is because the decisions that they were making, not as women, but as left-leaning political leaders, struck so poorly and badly vast sectors of the community, whether they be in the city or in the country, that people were losing their livelihoods, their jobs, having their decisions truncated, and their rights eroded on a daily basis. And understandably, they got angry and upset because up until these particular women, but these particular political leaders arrived with their particular political policies, everything was going okay. They were able to make ends meet, look after themselves, and then all of a sudden, as a result directly of these policies, whether they're in bike lanes and the frustration of small, medium business owners in Wellington, or whether it was on you lost your job simply because, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time under Jacinda Ardern, it's not surprising that people would get angry when their livelihoods are threatened by policies that make no sense, and in retrospect now, were clearly contrary of democracy and of common sense, both. So I just want to say to Helen Clark and to, I want particularly to say to all women, including my own daughters, can I say, who might be considering a political career, that in actual fact it's the Helen Clarks of this world warning about a threat that doesn't exist, hyperventilating abuse that has always existed from the mad, irrational fringes of any society. They're not going to go away. And the fact that they have been allowed to go on Twitter or Facebook doesn't make all those people, mostly hiding, I might add, behind anonymous accounts, any more powerful or influential. If you are mad enough to read what they say and consider that that's important and be offended, you're the wrong person to be in politics. Politics has always had those people. They have always been, as I've said, I guess originators of violent rhetoric, offensive behaviour. I've forgotten the the numerous times, there's scores now, that I've been threatened with death as a result of being on the wrong side of a political issue. But frankly, brush it off. Politics is not for the weak. It's not for the overly sensitive. It is not for those who believe that somehow they are owed a special regard because they've stood above the parapet and said, look at me, choose me, give me power over your life, which is what politics is. It's about asking people to trust you and to make decisions that affect the daily lives of literally everybody that you are or making policy for. Now, sometimes you do inherit the crazies. Crazies exist in the real world. But if you're going to be cowed by those crazies, go and choose macrame. I don't know, become a life coach and then try and teach other people the resilience that you lack. But for God's sake, get involved in politics. Because if we want to improve the world, it's the place to be and to go. And if you are going to be put off by what a whole series of anonymous people think, or by the hysteria of the Helen Clarks of this world, then you're not the right person to be in politics anyhow. And maybe Helen Clark is doing you a service by scaring you off. Politics makes decisions that affects people's lives. When you make bad decisions that make their lives worse, or in many cases eviscerate their careers, their opportunities, or their businesses or jobs, unsurprisingly, there will be a reaction. And all I can say is nobody forced Jacinda Ardern to leave the country except her. Nobody forced Sanna Marin to resign from the leadership of her Finnish party and then go on the lucrative speaking tour of the United States of America. And nobody required Tory Whānau to step down as the Mayor of Wellington. Their actions led to them reaching a conclusion that they were no longer electable. And that's why they took off. Not because they were criticised by the crazies. Those are my thoughts this afternoon. What are yours?